On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, we look at shipbuilding in 2024. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So, the BRS Group, which are shipbrokers, have released their annual report. This is a fantastic document if you've never seen it before. It contains a breakdown of all the different sectors of the shipbuilding industry, but in particular, one area we're going to look at is the area that deals with shipbuilding. It's a very extensive area that goes into great detail talking about what ships are on order and where, and what does this mean for ocean shipping going forward. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. So here's the introduction to the section done by BRS on shipbuilding. There was no respite for the new building market in 2023. Shipyards worldwide consolidated their order books for the third year in a row beyond the 3 to 4 year time horizon, a line where both ship owners and shipbuilders usually feel uncomfortable to commit. This is referring to the order book going out that far. How far in advance are you going to order ships? And what we're seeing is that extension going out. A lot of ships are on order. The question is where? What we're seeing is China is widening the gap from all other countries in terms of shipbuilding, and tankers are once again on the rebound. This chart breaks down deliveries versus demolitions on top. The dark blue there are delivery of ships in million of deadweight tons. And then below the blue line, those are demolitions. That is ship scrapping. And one of the things you've seen since 2012 is really a decrease in the amount of ships being built, and at the same time, a decrease in demolitions of vessels. But what we're seeing is the world fleet is increasing in terms of its size. Ships are getting older, they're being kept much longer, but we're starting to see a new spike in ship orders. If you look below in the lower chart there, those represent orders. The light blue are bulk vessels. This is the vessels that move ore and grain around the world. Had a huge kind of peak of those back in the early 2000s, right around 2007. We saw massive orders for those. Then yellow is tankers, and tankers purchases have been down over the years. The dark blue is containers, so that big spike in container orders in 2021, 2022, and going into 2023. And what this all means is that higher prices and late deliveries did not discourage ship owners to invest and compete from time to time for the few slots that were available. What we're seeing is the amount of tonnage ordered increase from 100.5 million deadweight tons. A deadweight ton is how much a vessel can carry. So from 100.5 million deadweight tons in 2022 to 116.5 million deadweight tons in 2023. The demand for tankers that in 2022 had sunk to its lowest level in a decade tripled from 10.7 million deadweight tons to 35 million deadweight tons. That's the second highest level since 2014. And this reflects a really strong charter market out there for tankers. And with what the Houthi are doing right now, enforcing diversions around Africa, that's only going to build to it. The dry bulker demand firmed up from 36.5 million to 43 million, and the demand for container carriers fell from 30.7 million to 18.3 million. That's very logical. We would expect that to happen because of the huge amount of vessels that were being ordered. Go on down here, we're still seeing demand driven in areas like LNG carriers, LPG carriers, and even car carriers. But the most interesting one, we're going to delve into this even more, is that China has cemented its position as the top shipbuilding nation thanks to its leap forward in new building orders from 52.9 million to 78.8 million. This is seeing a huge increase over and at the expense of other shipbuilding countries, in particularly in Korea, Japan, Europe, and the rest of the world. This chart breaks it down a little bit more for you there from 2022 to 2023. You can see gross tons, deadweight tons in terms of market sales for new ships, demolition sales, and new build resales. These are vessels that are on the way being built but are sold while they're still being built. So for 2023, you see over almost 4,000 ships up there on the market sales, about 218,000 deadweight tons, along with 192 ships in new build resales. If you look at the summary on the left, you can see orders are in place for over 1,800 ships. Deliveries took place for 1,300 ships, but the order book in place has nearly 4,369 vessels. This is looking at an active fleet out there right now sailing on the oceans of about 42,801 ships. The order book in place is for about 1 out of 10, so about 10.2% of the world ships, and about 1 out of 8 for in terms of deadweight tonnage. And if you look at the order book and where it goes to, this is the really startling information here. China, which had just gone over 50% in 2022, is now at 58.1%. They are building 2,415 ships on order. Put that into some sort of perspective. From 1937 to 1945, the U.S. Maritime Commission, which built all commercial ships for the United States during World War II, built 5,777 ships. But it's the deadweight tonnage that's absolutely amazing. 161 million deadweight tons. That's more than the entire shipbuilding program done by the United States in that period from 1937 to 1945. And then when you look at South Korea and Japan, Europe, and the rest of the world, what you see is a decrease in their market share. South Korea drops almost 4 percentage points. Japan drops about 2.5 percentage points. Europe down 0.2%, and the rest of the world down 0.3%. This just demonstrates how China is firming up its position as the world's largest shipbuilder. One of the more interesting charts deals with how does the world economy, global trade, and the maritime fleet correlate to each other. And one of the things you see is it's a pretty close relationship. When you look at the graph there showing world GDP and you look at seaborne trade and the world active fleet growth, it's fairly parallel. Where you see the big divergence obviously has to do with COVID in 2020, but global economic growth slowed from about 3.5% in 2022 to 3% in 2023. The historical average over the past 2 decades has been about 3.8%, and it's expected to slow down even further, maybe down to 2.9%. Despite this, what we're seeing is the maritime trade has fared fairly well with an increase in what's called ton miles. And ton miles is how much it takes to haul a ton of goods. That has grown by 4.1% year on year in 2023. And a lot of this has to do with diversions caused by the Houthi in the Red Sea and the low water levels in and around the Panama Canal. Both dry bulk and tankers witnessed growth in 2023. Likewise, container throughput had contracted by about 1.4% in 2020 and then rebounded spectacularly by 6% in 2021 and then fell 3.9% in 2022 and then again by 0.3% in 2023. In terms of what type of ships are being built, you can see the very first columns there deal with tankers from VLCCs, very large crude carriers, which are the largest tankers, down to handy tankers. And what you see is there's a very small amount of orders in place. We're seeing a little bit of a peak up here in 2023 with some Suezmax and some Aframax LR2s. These are the larger size vessels that can swing through the Suez Canal, carry both crude oil and also refined products. In terms of bulkers, we're still seeing a pretty steady ordering for bulk carriers. These are the Cape-size vessels. These are the ones that have to go around the Cape of Good Hope, all the way down to vessels that can go through a variety of areas with the Panamax and the Supramax down to the handy size. Largest group we saw ordered was obviously container ships in 2021, a massive spike in the number of container ships being ordered. And the chart below there breaks down container ships in a little bit more detailed. So that if you look at what's out there, there are about 5,977 container ships out there in the world fleet, a capacity of about 28 million TEU. That's a 20-foot equivalent unit, a 20-foot box. What you typically see on a container ship is a 40-foot box. an FEU, and FEU is equal to 2 TEUs. So we got about 28.1 million TEUs out there. On the order book is 844 vessels. That represents 7 million TEUs coming out there. That's a 25% increase in terms of what we're seeing. But what's really interesting is looking at what size vessels are being ordered. The largest group of vessels are those between about 13,300 TEUs to 18,000 TEUs. These are vessels that can largely swing through both the Suez and the Panama Canal, those Neo-Panamax vessels that can go through the large lock of the Panama Canal that opened in 2016. Other areas where you're seeing growth in the tanker fleet, in the container ship fleet, is the ultra-large container ships. Those are the ones over 18,000 TEUs. They're up over 29.6%. And the ones just below the Neo-Panamax, 29.8%. In terms of orders, in terms of from 2022 to 2023, you can see there's 18.9 million deadweight tons on order. We're looking at an order book of 80.6 million deadweight tons. And where are those ships being built? Well, when you look in terms of market share, it is China once again with that largest sector market share, 56.9%, followed by Korea with 33.7%, and then Japan with 8.9%. If you look at tankers versus containers, it's a very similar setup, with China having about 62.6% of the tanker fleet, Korea 19.5%, and Japan 9.4%. That 1, 2, 3 order in terms of shipbuilding is pretty standard. So these are new build prices for 2023. Look at those last two columns. End of 2023, you'll see China, and then you'll see South Korea and Japan in terms of price. The big thing to note here is how much China is able to undercut South Korea and Japan consistently in terms of shipbuilding. So if you're looking to build a very large crude carrier, or VLCC, that's the largest tankers in the world out there, you're paying $118 million versus $127 million in South Korea or Japan. If you're looking at a Suezmax, well, then again, you are being undercut. This is even more pronounced when you look at dual fuel LNG. So a lot of ships are adopting two types of fuel to better improve their emissions, especially when they go into the environmental control areas of countries. So, for example, many vessels are using LNG or methanol. And when you look at dual fuel, the ships become much more expensive, but China is still able to undercut both South Korea and Japan in those areas. When you get into the bulkers, we see the same thing again, with bulkers being cheaper in China versus South Korea, and even in the container ships. You see it with post-Panamax vessels costing about 84.5 million new versus 100 million in South Korea and Japan, and it's same down that entire list there. And it's important to remember that one of the reasons we see this change taking place has to do with the fact that China provides both direct and indirect subsidies to their shipbuilders. So direct subsidies, there's a report out by CSIS called Hidden Harbors that identified from 2010 to 2018 that China provided $132 billion in direct subsidies to shipbuilders. And then in a Harvard report, and I'll have the links in the show notes for you to take a look at, they identified indirect costs. So, for example, China gets their shipbuilders have access to cheap land, cheap labor, cheap capital, cheap material and resources, low government oversight and safety standards, which means that they can undercut everybody who competes against them. So when people sit there and say, well, it's really expensive to build in the United States, you've got to look at the fact that, number one, China is driving down the cost of shipbuilding worldwide. South Korea and Japan have to chase after China or they lose market share. So they have to drive down the cost of their vessels, and they do that largely through direct and indirect subsidies. So let's take a look at each of the shipbuilding areas around the world and see how they have altered and what's going on in each of them. So China cemented its position as the top shipbuilding nation thanks to its leap forward in shipbuilding orders, going from 52.9 million deadweight tons to 78.8 million deadweight tons. bringing its order book from about 123 million deadweight tons to 161 million deadweight tons. So order book, again, is what is currently on order. It's everything including this year and past years. Orders are for this year. So when you look at this, you've seen China go up in terms of number of ships and in overall deadweight tonnage. If you look at the segments of the sectors, you'll see that China is number one in the dry bulk sector with 69.2% of the order book. It's number one in the tanker sector with 52.3% of the order book, and number one in the container ship sector with 56.9%. It's also first in other ship segments with 36.4%. If you try to find an area where China is not first, probably the one sector that they're losing out in is in the liquefied natural gas carriers. They're losing out to Korea, which has about 71% of that order book. So last year, China's total output increased from 37.9 million deadweight tons to 40.2 million deadweight tons. So if you look at the top four shipyard groups in China, we're talking about the China State Shipbuilding Corporation, CSSC, talking about COSCO Shipping Heavy Industries, Yangjiang, and the New Time Shipyard. They account for 68% of the Chinese order book. The CSSC, the China State Shipbuilding Corporation, is number one. It holds 36%, or about 58 million deadweight tons of the Chinese order book. That's 21% of the global order book. COSCO Heavy Industries holds about 13% of the Chinese order book, about 21 million tons. That's about 8% of the global order book. And then the last two, Yangjiang and the New Time Shipyards, each of them hold order books of about 11 and 8% respectively. That puts them about fourth and sixth in terms of the global order book. One of the things we've seen happening over the years is China has consolidated their shipyards into much larger shipyards. When China started this in the 2000s, there was a myriad of small little shipyards. But what they have done over the years is just begun to really consolidate them together. In 2023, Chinese shipyards secured orders for 270 dual-fuel propulsion vessels against roughly about 189 the year before in 2022 and as little as 46 back in 2019. This represented 64% of the total dual-fuel ships ordered globally in 2023. We've also seen some very large orders by individual companies. Dynacom, for example, ordered 30 tankers from China in 2023. We also see the CM Group signing a contract for 6 ammonia bulkers with the Qingdao shipyard in 2023. That brings their total order of Newcastle Maxes up to about 26 ships. In second place, you have South Korea. Now, South Korea ranks second globally with 65.2 million deadweight tons on their order book, or about 23.5% of the global share. It's 20 million deadweight tons of new building orders, and its tonnage output of about 22.3 million deadweight tons. Now, Korea has lost substantially its market share, dropping from 27.9 to 23.5, and securing of new build orders went from 25% down to 20%. The sole segment where Korea gained new building was in tankers, where it went from 2.5 million deadweight up to 6.1 million deadweight. But this represents a fraction of what China succeeded in getting. China went from 4.9 million deadweight tons of tankers to 26.3 million deadweight tons of tankers, just a substantial growth in terms of vessels. Now, Korea still dominates in the construction of LNG carriers. We expect to see that keep happening. They accounted for 64% of new build orders in 2023, with 56 new units against 131 in 2022. But we're seeing that Chinese yards are now gearing up in their capacity. We're also seeing the consolidation of the Korean shipbuilding industry. About 84% of the new build orders were secured by the big three. Hyundai Heavy Industries holding about 62%, Samsung about 17%, and Hanwha, which was formerly Daewoo, about 5%. Only 9 Korean shipyards received new orders in 2023 compared with 23 in 2008. And Korean shipbuilding output has decreased from 23.7 million deadweight tons in 2022 to 22.3 million. So some big events for Korea during this period of time. Obviously, the big three, HHI, Samsung, and Hanwha, were managed to be back in the black in 2023 after years of deficits. But South Korean shipyards are being hit extremely hard with labor crises. They're having a hard time getting it in. To do that, they're easing their immigration laws. They're trying to bring in about 10,000 foreign workers to staff their shipyards. The other big news, of course, was Daewoo getting acquired by the Hanwha Group, which is the South Korea's seventh largest business conglomerate. They rebranded it as Hanwha Ocean in 2023. The Korean Development Bank, who managed the shipyard for over 2 decades, reduced their stake to about 28% in 2023. So in 2023, Korean shipyards secured orders for about 103 dual-fuel propulsion vessels. This is excluding LNG tankers. That represents about 54% of the orders placed in Korea. So obviously the new dual-fuel use is going to be a big element for Korea. That's against 72 orders in 2022. This is about 24% of the total dual-fuel ships ordered globally last year. In comparison, Chinese and Japanese yards won 64% and 7% respectively. Obviously, Korea's got to do more to be able to get that tonnage from China. In terms of orders, Samsung secured an order for 16,000 TEU dual-fuel methanol container ships from Taiwan's Evergreen. So Japan, which was the dominant shipbuilder for decades, if you look at the 50s going into the 60s and 70s, it was Japan that was what China is today. And then it was eclipsed by South Korea in the 80s to the 2000s. And now it's China doing exactly the same thing that Japan and South Korea. Japan maintained its position as the third largest shipbuilder in 2023 with 37.4 million deadweight tons on order. That's 13.5 of its market share. They managed to gain some new building orders in the tanker and container carrier segments, but it's losing ground on bulkers, which had been a traditional backbone for the Japanese shipping industry. Japan's 5 largest shipyards, Nihon, which is Imbari and JMU together, Oshima, Shin-Kurushima, and Nomura secured a combined 82% of the total new orders placed in Japanese yards in 2023, and Imbari and JMU represent about 62% of those. Japan's total shipbuilding output is 15.4 million deadweight tons, which is on par with what it was doing roughly in 2022. So back in January of 2021, JMU, Japan Marine United, and Imbari launched their joint venture, Nihon Shipyard, with Imbari holding a 51% stake and JMU 49%. The new company is handling all commercial ships, excluding LNGs. Nihon Shipyard secured the world's first medium-sized ammonia-fueled ammonia carrier. This ship will be equipped with Japanese-built engines. The order is a result of a national product. As more ships shift over to alternate fuels, there's got to be a way to transport that alternate fuels, and ammonia is one of those. Oshima Shipyard, Shin-Kurushima, and Nomura, who are the 3rd, 4th, and 5th largest Japanese shipbuilders, secured a combined 61 ships for a total of 2.7 million deadweight tons. Next, we jump over to the combined effort of European shipyards. Now, they maintain their order book with about 10 million tons of vessels, about 333 ships. New orders increased slightly due to the cruise segment. We're seeing cruise ships being back on order. About 11 new ships came on, and then about 71 dry cargo ships. The nation with the strongest order book in Europe is Italy, with 2.7 million gross tons. That's due to the position of Fincantieri as the world's largest cruise ship builder. But Fincantieri has also made an agreement with China to assist in the Chinese endeavor to start building cruise ships. By the end of 2023, Fincantieri had 30 large cruise ships on order. That represents about 45.2% of the global cruise ship order. In second place is Russia among European countries with about 2.6 million gross tons. France is also in second place. They have it with their largest shipyard, Chantier de l'Antique, which has an order book for 10 cruise ships. Then you have Germany in third place with Meyer Werft, which is also building cruise ships. Finland is in fourth place. They not only just build cruise ships, but they also build ferries and icebreakers. And then Turkey's shipbuilding has continued to expand with 17 ships on order in 2023, on top of 44 that they had won in 2022. Definitely seeing the evolution here of the Turkish shipbuilding. Dutch shipbuilders are right behind them. A lot of those are very niche market vessels, dredges, and other specialized vessels. And then we see Poland, Croatia, and Spain and other countries coming in behind. Finally, we have the rest of the world, and you look at this order book, it's fairly small. It has slightly increased since last year, with 2023 being up 8.8 million deadweight tons over 8.5. That is still slipping in terms of total percentages from 3.5 down to 3.2. 18 shipyards secured these new orders compared with just 8 in 2021. The first two yards in Cebu in the Philippines and HVS in Vietnam remain the most prolific and account both for about 48.7 and then 32.6% respectively. In the Philippines, Tsutsuni Cebu maintained its leadership in terms of shipyards over the rest of the world. But last year, what we've seen is Vietnam expanding its order book. In third place is Iran, which is not really surprising because they are moving up and building some of their own tankers. India also moving up into fourth position. And then in fifth position is the United States. Here in 2022, it had seen 14 ships ordered. 10 of them were small coastal catamaran cruise ships built at Chesapeake Shipyard in Salisbury, Maryland for American cruise ships. And then an order being placed by Matson at Philly Shipyard for 3 dual-fueled LNG 3600 TEU container ships, along with a hybrid ferry for the state of Washington being built over in Vigor. So in terms of other information that we know, one of the things we're seeing is an elongation of delivery periods from about 2.5 to about 3.5 to 4 years in some cases for ships to be delivered. It is taking longer to build ships. A lot of this has to do with supply chain and material issues that we're seeing. This is a case around the world except for Japan. Japan is being pretty much on schedule and on time. Other countries are taking a bit longer. The proliferation of dual fuel, the new fuels out there, is happening. Liquefied natural gas, liquefied petroleum gas, methanol, ethanol, batteries, wind, hydrogen, ammonia, you name it. They're trying everything out there. And what we're seeing is more and more ships on the order book for these new types of fuel. Remember, there's a goal set in place by the International Maritime Organization to get a 50% carbon reduction from global shipping by 2050 based on 2008 numbers. That means we have to use this interim fuel until we can come to a solution that gets us to the 50% cap. So shipbuilders and ship companies are trying a whole batch of things, but this makes bunkering, refueling vessels very difficult because you just can't pull into Singapore, Fujairah, Houston, Rotterdam, and load up with the old bunker C. We've shifted over to very low sulfur fuel oils or high sulfur fuel oils with a scrubber system to scrub your exhaust. But now what we're seeing is more and more advents of these new fuel systems. And that means you have to have the bunkering facilities for them. You just can't pull up and get liquefied natural gas anywhere. Same thing with ammonia or ethane or methanol. You have to have the production and storage sites in place. Other thing we should be looking for in 2024 is for more orders for tankers. The fleet is getting older, and not just the tanker fleet, the entire world fleet is getting older, which means that replacement tonnage will have to be ordered. And shipping is not like you buying a car or a home. Shipping tends to order ships when they have cash in hand. They like to go in and pay for the vessels. They don't want to be saddled with debt over the cross of the length of the vessel. So like we saw with the container ships, we saw this huge surge to go buy container ships in 2021 when the container liners were flush with cash. Now with tanker companies having to haul longer distances, they're going to be flush with cash. Maybe. We're a lot of debate about this. But we expect to see more orders for tankers out there. And so we're going to see some more vessels. What we saw in 2008 after that crisis was order books went up and demolitions went up. We have not yet seen the demolitions going up. We're waiting to see that surge of vessels heading to Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan to be scrapped but we haven't quite seen it yet, but we expect it to happen. So if we start seeing new orders, this is going to be important. Remember, too, go back to one of my earlier videos, we were talking about the creation of the dual fleet, sometimes referred to as the shadow, the dark, or the gray fleet, where a lot of vessels that would have been scrapped are now being shifted over into these new registries under new insurance companies, and they're hauling oil and fuel and cargo for Russia, for Iran, for Venezuela outside the mainstream. And that's keeping vessels out there much longer. But I strongly recommend you take a look at the whole BRS Shipbrokers annual report. It is a great report, full of details. I'll have the link in the show notes down below. Of course, go over to it. If you want to break down not just of shipbuilding, but each of the individual sectors, this is the kind of data you really want to be looking at. It is great. I look forward to this report every year. I am such a loser. I really need to get a life that I look forward to a report from a shipbroker. But that's what you get when you watch a channel called What's Going On with Shipping. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a big thumbs up, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, you hit that super thanks button down below, or head on over to Patreon and get a monthly or yearly subscription. If you're interested in updates on what is happening in and around the bridge at Baltimore, head over to go see Captain Andy on the Menorcan Mullet. He has been broadcasting live from Baltimore. Some great imagery is being put together by Andy and his crew of the Menorcan Navy. He did this for us when we had the Golden Ray rollover in Brunswick, Georgia, and he's doing the same right now up in Baltimore. Show him a little love. Go out there and support him and his crew. They're doing a great job up there, really giving you all the details. We're hoping to see the channel open up again about May 10th. We're seeing the removal of wreckage off the dolly right now, and then expecting to see the dolly pulled out sometime within the next week or so. So we're going to be following that. There's still a lot of issues going on. They've got bad weather right now. That's going to be an impediment. But once the dolly is removed, then the removal, the span, the section from the center there is going to go pretty quick. There's a lot of assets on place. Go check out our past videos with Bill Doyle, from the CEO of Dredging Contractors of America, Weeks, Chapman, Don John, Resolve, some great companies up there working their butts off to get Baltimore open for business once again. Till our next video, this is Sal, signing off.